Hello, everyone. Welcome to Durrett's Take. It's now the month of March. So, therefore, it's time for my updated March Madness projections. Let's get started with the top overall number one seeds. I have them being obviously Auburn, Duke, and then Houston's moved up to a one seed, controlling the Big 12 there. And then the winner of the Tennessee Alabama game was going to be on the number one seed line, and that happened to be Tennessee hitting that buzzer beater to win the game. So I have Tennessee as a one seed. And then on the two seed line, you got Alabama, Florida, Michigan State has been on a roll recently in the Big Ten, and then Iowa State. Iowa State's had some injuries and all that, as the committee has said before back a month ago when they had their top 16 at the time. But now, from what I hear, they're getting healthy. They're fully healthy. They're starting to look like the form they had in non-conference play before they had all these injuries. So I'm gonna have Iowa State as a two seed for now. As a three seed, you got Wisconsin. You got Texas Tech. You got Texas A&M, who's on a 4-game lose streak, actually. Kind of downward spiral there, but they should still be a top 3 seed. And then St. John's as the last 3 seed because they continue to win. And then a 4 seed, you got Michigan, which could have been a 3 seed yesterday if they had beaten Illinois at home, but they didn't. Purdue has kind of been, so-so. And then Kentucky, who's had a bunch of injury histories. In fact, one of their starters, Jackson Robinson's now, as a wrist injury, is out for the season. So it's definitely not the same Kentucky team it was to start the season when they had all those, big upsets. And then the other 4 seed have it going to Maryland. Then for the 5 seeds, we got Arizona, you got Missouri, I got Oregon, and then you got Clemson. The last 5 seed spot was kind of like a debate with multiple teams, but I just went with Clemson just because they're on a roll recently. And they're, in my opinion, the second best team in the ACC. And then the 6th seed, you got Marquette, you got St. Mary's, you got UCLA. And then for that last 6 seed spot, I went with Louisville just because they're on a roll right now. And then for the 7 seed spots, you get Kansas, who's falling downward, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and then Memphis. And then the 8 seed line, I got BYU, Vanderbilt, who's now off the bubble because of the good week they've had, and they're just looking like a tournament team recently. So I feel like unless disaster happened, they lose out, they should be in. Illinois 8, they kind of saved themselves from dropping down even further after that big win at Michigan that I spoke about yesterday. And then Creighton I have as the last 8 seed. And it was between Creighton and UConn for that last 8 seed spot, but I'm going to go with Creighton. Just because Creighton just by barely has a little bit of the better metrics. So that's what I'm going Creighton there. And then 9 seed, I got UConn, New Mexico, leading Mountain West, and then Gonzaga, who just picked up 2 quad 1 wins as past week to kind of get them off the bubble. And then Utah State, who's not looking as sharp recently. Again, as long as they don't suffer a bad loss, they should be good. And now we start to get to the real like bubble teams. So on the 10 seed line, I got West Virginia on the 10 seed line. I know they haven't been playing their best ball as of late. And again, the committee has to decide, okay, do we want to exclude, the first, basically the non-conference play, because that's when one of their best scorers was healthy. Now, conference play, he hasn't been healthy all year, and he's not going to come back at all. So it's interesting how the committee will evaluate West Virginia. From what I've heard from committee members who've done interviews, like they've said multiple times, like, hey, we evaluate the whole season. We don't look at winning streaks recently or losing streaks recently. Like we don't look at, we're not recency biased. We're just what's happened throughout the season. So that's why I feel like West Virginia is still in a good spot. Because they have a ton of good wins, like neutral site wins against Gonzaga, Arizona, at Kansas versus Iowa State, who's a 2 seed. They swept Cincinnati, fellow Big 12 ball team, and all that stuff. Like, they definitely got the wins there. Basically, as long as West Virginia can win at least one more game, whether it's this week or in the Big 12 tournament, then I do feel like they should be in. Next, you got Baylor as another 10 seed. They're kind of, been on downward spiral recently. Again, kind of like West Virginia, they got a bunch of good wins. They got a neutral site win at St. John's, which is going to be very big to the committee. Beat Arkansas neutral court. which is a fellow Bubble team there. They've beaten Kansas. They've beaten West Virginia. The and they have a good higher net ranking than most of the other bubble teams. The only problem with Baylor though is that they got a brutal week this week because they have to go to TCU, which is kind of like the Texas rivalry there. They have to go to their rivals TCU, and then they have to host Houston. So unless Houston, since Houston's already locked at the Big 12 list, Houston decides to just play backups and not final game, then there's a scenario where they could go 0-2 this week. And if that's the case, then you really need to make sure you win at least one game, if not potentially two games, in the Big 12 tournament to secure your spot. Now, if they can at least split this week, then I feel like they can get in, whether they win a Big 12 tournament game or not. But this week won't be easy for them. Another 10 seed, you got San Diego State. Again, they don't always look the prettiest. Like beating teams, they should be, but they're like barely squeaking by teams. They should be easily. But the goal there for San Diego State is that they just keep on winning, and with their good non-conference schedule, beat UC San Diego, beaten Creighton, beaten Houston. They swept a fellow bubble team, Boise State, twice. They've beaten New Mexico at least once. So the fact that they've done those things, I feel like they should, as long as they don't suffer a bad loss, they should be in. And then the last 10 seed, I have them going to a surging team right now, and that's Indiana. Ever since they announced, their head coach is going to be on at the end of the year, they've been playing hard for him. They've been playing a lot better, made some lineup changes and all that. They got a bunch of key wins. They won at Ohio State, which is a fellow bubble team. They won at Michigan State, which is a good win, home versus Purdue and all that. They've won their last 5 games, as I mentioned. So as long as they continue that trajectory, then I feel like they can avoid Dayton, basically, to avoid the last 4 in, because they face both Big Ten bubble teams in Ohio State and Nebraska this week, so they kind of control their own fate there. And then 11 seed VCU. Hopefully VCU's case they don't lose an A10 tournament because their bubble chances are a little iffy. But I feel like they'll win the A10, so they'll get that 11th spot as the highest, one of the higher teams there from all the lesser conferences to get a seed. And then I got Georgia as the last team to avoid the play-in, basically the last 4 in. So I have, and the reason for that is because they beat Florida at home, which Florida's a 2, that's a very important win there, and then they smashed Buffalo Bubble Team Texas on the road. So and at SEC, it's very transactional. Like one week look good, next week work bad, so it's all fluid. But this week they look really good compared to the other SEC bubble teams, which I've had to get into, and that's why I have them avoiding that. Okay, so now for the last 4 in, the first team will be Ohio State. They got a bunch of good wins, at Iowa, at Purdue, Kentucky, Texas, Maryland. They got a bunch of good wins. Their overall record of 16-13, that's the kind of hiccup there. So if you're Ohio State, as long as you can just try to win at least 1 or 2 more games, then they could feel a little bit good going on Selection Sunday. Then the next team I have Arkansas. Now they were 2 weeks ago. They were in my last 4 buys, not the last 4, but because of that just horrible spanking they got at South Carolina this past week. Even though that's a quad 2 loss, it's not like it's a bad loss on the resume per se, but just after that spanking they got, it's just they're just still super inconsistent. But based off the wins they had, against Michigan, Michigan and Georgia, Texas twice, and then Missouri. That's why I feel like there's enough meat on the bones there where you can justify those last 4 team in. Next, you got Nebraska. They took a horrible loss to Minnesota on Saturday, and so they've kind of fallen downward as well. And they have 2 quad 3 losses, which is not good to me, but they have a bunch of good ones like at Creighton, UCLA, Illinois, at Oregon, at Ohio State, at Northwestern. So there's a lot of good wins there, but the problem is the net ranking, which is not good compared to other bubble teams at 57. And then again, just the way they're looking right now. So they need to get things back on the court, or else they're going to fall out completely for sure. And then last but not least, there's, again, multiple teams you could have picked here for the last team in, but I'm going to go with Oklahoma, mainly because, again, when you look at the whole season in totality, you got to factor in non-conference play, and that's where Oklahoma picked up a lot of good wins in non-conference play. Arizona, Louisville, Oklahoma State, Michigan, and all that. They've also beaten Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State. So there's a bunch of good wins there. And they have one bad loss in the home loss versus LSU, but as long as Oklahoma can at least win one or two more games, then there's a good case they could be in. So then that means for my first four out, I have Texas, because again, you just gotta have all the SEC teams can't be in. Yeah, someone has to be left out, and I have that being Texas right now. Just don't like the momentum that they're on right now. And then Xavier and North Carolina are both in the same boat. They have really, decent wins, especially in Xavier's case. But the problem is each only have one quad one win, and since the quad two things have been invented, basically, the committee doesn't leave out a major conference team, or sorry, the committee leaves out major conference teams that only have one or as you know quad one wins. So both North Carolina and Xavier need to get at least one more quad one win, and like whether it's to end the week here because North Carolina faces Duke if you can get one there, or if you're in both cases just in the the respective conference tournaments, you just got to get something there. If you can get one more quad one, and then both of them can have a chance to get in. And then also Boise State's in heavy consideration. Again, just because the committee's Mountain West biased against them last year, that's why I have Boise State out, but they definitely have the metrics to be there. They just have two quad three losses. That's the only thing that's like, not the best look for them. And then some other teams under consideration still is SMU. They still need to get a quad one win. Cincinnati, again, only has one. They need another one. Northwestern has a couple. Just a lot of losses, not a good overall record. And then Wake Forest is kind of hanging on by a thread there with the recent bad losses. So that's what I have there. If you want to look at the full bracket of who I have playing who, make sure to check out my LinkedIn page down the red. Now, I won't wait 2 weeks again to come up with my new projections, because in 2 weeks, we'll know what the bracket is. So I'll have another update, next Monday, and then a couple days after that before the NCAA tournament selection process happens. Well, thank you very much for listening to my podcast today. Please subscribe to my channel and tell me about me. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.